Valentine's Day. The most expensive restaurant in the city. Sharon Elliott sat alone. Her boyfriend had just walked out the door without looking back. But she didn't know the worst part yet. The worst part was the man now walking toward her table. The most dangerous man in the city. And he wasn't there to ask her to leave. He leaned in close. His voice low. Barely a whisper. "Can I be your
Can I be
Valentine
your
tonight?"
Valentine tonight?
She said
Yes.
yes. She had no idea what that one word was about to cost her. What's good, everyone? Thanks a million for being loyal subscribers and viewers. Help us out by commenting on your location and the time where you are right now. It gives us insight into how to better connect with you all. Sharon Elliott believed it too. She sat at a corner table, intimate, tucked slightly away from the main floor, draped in soft gold light. The kind of table made for whispered confessions and quiet promises. She wore a deep burgundy dress she had saved for 3 months to buy, her dark hair swept loosely over one shoulder, a single strand of pearls at her neck that had belonged to her grandmother. She had spent 40 minutes on her makeup. Not because she was vain, but because tonight mattered. Tonight, Daniel was supposed to tell her he loved her. Tonight was supposed to be proof that all the waiting, all the hoping, all the quiet morning she spent believing in something better, that it had all been worth it. Daniel had excused himself 10 minutes ago. Said he needed to use the restroom. That was 15 minutes ago now. Sharon glanced toward the hallway. Then at her phone. Nothing. She picked up her wine glass, a deep ruby Bordeaux she hadn't touched, and set it back down. Her fingers were cold. She told herself he was just taking his time. Men did that. It didn't mean anything. 20 minutes. The waiter, a young man named Pierre who had been attentive all evening, approached the table with careful footsteps. His expression had changed. Something in his eyes that Sharon couldn't quite read. Nervousness, maybe. Pity. "Madam," he said softly. I'm so sorry to tell you this." Sharon looked up. "Your companion. He has left. He left cash at the front counter and asked me to." Pierre trailed off, swallowed. "He asked me to apologize." The words didn't hit her immediately. They landed somewhere distant, like hearing thunder from very far away, knowing the storm is coming but not feeling the rain yet. Her phone buzzed. One message. From Daniel. "I'm sorry. I can't be what you want. I never could. Please don't call me." Sharon read it once. Twice. A third time, not because she didn't understand it, but because her mind kept searching for the part where it made sense. The part where the man who held her hand across this table 40 minutes ago, who smiled at her over the menu, who said, "Tonight's going to be perfect." The part where that man and this message belonged to the same person. They didn't. She set the phone face down on the table. Very carefully. Very slowly. And she did not cry. Not yet. She simply sat, perfectly still, perfectly upright, and stared at the candle flame in front of her. The flame danced. Sharon did not. The piano played on. Couples smiled across their tables. And Sharon Elliott sat alone on Valentine's Day, invisible in a room full of love, holding a glass of wine she couldn't bring herself to drink. It was Elaine, the restaurant manager, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and a voice that never rose above a certain controlled pitch, who approached next. She moved with purpose, leaning down close, her tone urgent but hushed. "Miss Elliott, I'm so sorry about what just happened. Truly." A pause. A breath. "But I need to speak with you about something sensitive." Sharon looked up. Her eyes were glassy but dry. "What is it?" Elaine glanced around, quickly, the way someone does when the walls might be listening. "This table. The one you're sitting at. It was reserved." For someone very specific. Someone very important to this establishment. She chose her words like she was stepping through a minefield. We need you to move, Mississippi. Quietly. Quickly. Before he arrives. Sharon blinked. Who? Elaine opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. Before she could answer, the front door of Lumiere opened. The change was immediate. Subtle, but unmistakable, like a shift in air pressure before a storm. The piano player's fingers hesitated for half a beat. A waiter near the entrance straightened his posture without being told to. Conversations didn't stop, but they quieted. Just slightly, just enough. And then he walked in. He moved through the restaurant the way water moves through stone, not forcing anything, not demanding space. He simply occupied it. A charcoal suit, impeccably tailored, that sat on his frame like it had been carved for him. Dark hair, swept back. A jaw that looked like it had been built to hold secrets. His eyes, calm, steady, unhurried, swept across the room once. Not reading faces. Reading the room. Calculating. Owning it without saying a word. Two men followed at a respectful distance behind him. They wore suits too, but theirs didn't fit the same way. They were not here to dine. Anthony Cameron. He didn't look at Elaine. He didn't look at the other tables. He looked at the table. His table. The corner table draped in gold light, where a woman in burgundy sat alone with tears she hadn't let fall yet, holding a glass of wine like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to the earth. He stopped walking. And for just a moment, just one fraction of a second that no one in that room would have caught, something flickered across Anthony Cameron's face. Something that didn't belong on the face of the most feared man in the city. Recognition. Elaine stood frozen between them, one hand raised as if to intercept, her mouth open but no words coming out. The piano played on. The candles flickered. And Sharon Elliott, still sitting, still breathless, still not knowing, finally looked up. Elaine opened her mouth to speak, to apologize, to explain, to do something, but Anthony raised one hand. A single, slow gesture. Not aggressive. Not threatening. Simply final. She closed her mouth, stepped back, and disappeared into the quiet machinery of the restaurant like she had never been there at all. Sharon watched the exchange without fully understanding it. She had seen the way the room moved around this man, the way the air itself seemed to rearrange. She had seen the two men in suits linger by the entrance like shadows that had learned to stand still. She knew, instinctively, the way a deer knows the difference between wind and footsteps, that this was not an ordinary person walking toward her table. But she was too hollowed out to be afraid. Anthony stopped at the edge of the table. He didn't speak immediately. He stood there, close enough that she could smell something clean and sharp, like cedar and cold air, and he looked at her. Not the way men usually looked at Sharon Elliott. Not with hunger or casual interest, or the kind of appraisal that made her want to cross her arms over her chest. He looked at her the way someone looks at a painting they've seen 100 times but are only now truly seeing for the first time. His eyes moved, just briefly, to the untouched wine glass. To the phone, face down on the table. To the single place setting across from her, the napkin still folded, the chair still tucked in. He read the scene in 2 seconds. He understood everything. And then, without a word, he pulled out the empty chair, the one that had been Daniel's, and sat down. Sharon's breath caught. Not because he was imposing. Because he was calm. In the middle of a room full of noise and light and performance, this man moved like he had all the time in the world. Like sitting across from a crying woman on Valentine's Day was exactly where he intended to be. That's... Sharon started, her voice coming out rougher than she intended. She cleared her throat. That's someone's seat. Anthony looked at her. The ghost of something, not quite a smile, not quite amusement, passed over his features. "It's empty," he said. Simply. Quietly. As if that were the only thing that mattered. A beat of silence stretched between them. The piano filled it. Something soft and unfinished sounding, like a question without an answer. Sharon studied his face, searching for the angle. There was always an angle. Men didn't just sit down. They wanted something. They were performing something. They were. "You've been crying," Anthony said. It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't pity. It was an observation, delivered with the same neutrality someone might use to say it's raining outside. A fact. Acknowledged. Not judged. Something inside Sharon's chest tightened painfully. Because no one had said it out loud yet. The waiter had danced around it. Elaine had pretended not to notice. The entire restaurant had performed elaborate ignorance, the way people do when they witness someone's humiliation in public. But this man, this stranger, simply named it. And somehow, that was the kindest thing anyone had done to her all night. She didn't confirm it. She didn't need to. The redness around her eyes said everything. Another silence. Anthony didn't fill it. He simply sat, hands resting loosely on the table, shoulders relaxed, gaze steady, and waited. He waited the way someone waits who has learned that silence is not emptiness. It's space. And space, sometimes, is the only gift you can give a person who is drowning. Sharon was the one who broke it. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "Whatever this is, I can move. I know this table is." "Sharon." She stopped. Blinked. "How do you know my name?" The reservation had a name on it. "Yours." "For two." His eyes held hers, steady, unreadable, but not unkind. "The other person isn't coming back tonight." The words landed softly. Not cruel. Just honest. And honesty, Sharon was learning, could cut just as deeply as cruelty. Especially when it confirmed what you already knew but weren't ready to say out loud. She looked down at the table. At her hands, folded tightly in her lap, knuckles white. At the single pearl necklace catching the candlelight. At the life she had dressed up and brought to this table tonight, only to watch it walk out the door without looking back. When she looked up again, Anthony was watching her with an expression she couldn't decode. Something quiet lived behind his eyes. Something old and carefully guarded. Something that understood. He leaned forward. Just slightly. Not crowding her. Closing the distance by inches, not feet. And when he spoke, his voice was low enough that it belonged only to her. "To this table. To this single, strange, impossible moment. Can I be your Valentine tonight?" The words hung in the air between them like a held breath. Sharon stared at him. The piano played. A waiter passed behind them carrying a tray of champagne flutes, the glasses catching light like small captured stars. The restaurant hummed and glittered around them. Indifferent, alive, unaware that something had just shifted at this corner table. Something small. Something quiet. Something that would change everything. Sharon opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. "You don't even know my name," she whispered. And then, catching herself, a ghost of disbelief in her own voice, she added, "Well, not really." Anthony held her gaze. And this time, the ghost of a smile did cross his face. Faint, careful, like a man who had forgotten he was still capable of it. "Then tell me," he said. Sharon looked at him for a long moment. The tears she had been holding back all evening, the ones she refused to let fall in front of strangers, in front of waiters, in front of a boyfriend who couldn't even face her when he left, those tears trembled at the edge of her lashes. But they didn't fall. Instead, she took a breath. A real one. Deep and slow, the kind that comes after something breaks open inside you. Sharon, she said. My name is Sharon. Anthony nodded. Once. As if he had been waiting for exactly that answer. And for the first time all evening, the silence between them didn't feel like emptiness. It felt like the beginning of something neither of them had a name for yet. Dinner arrived in quiet succession. Dishes Sharon hadn't ordered, each one placed before her with practiced grace by waiters who moved around Anthony like satellites around a sun. He had ordered without asking her. Not out of arrogance. He simply knew, the way someone knows a room before they enter it. He chose dishes that were light, elegant, forgiving. Not heavy. Not overwhelming. As if he understood without being told, that Sharon's appetite had left with Daniel and that what she needed now wasn't a meal. It was something to do with her hands. She ate. Slowly. Mechanically at first, then with a hunger she hadn't expected. The kind that comes when your body decides to survive even when your heart hasn't caught up yet. And as the food settled between them, so did Sharon's guard. It rose quietly, not like a wall slamming shut, but like a tide creeping in. Inch by inch. Question by question. So, she said, setting down her fork with deliberate care. Who exactly are you? Anthony didn't look up from his plate immediately. He chewed. Swallowed. Set his own fork down with the same careful precision she had used, as if mirroring her without meaning to. Someone having dinner, he said. That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters tonight. Sharon tilted her head. Studied him the way an artist studies a subject she can't quite capture. Looking for the lines that don't fit, the shadows that don't belong. The way this restaurant is acting around you, she said slowly, that's not how people act around someone who's just having dinner. A beat. Anthony's expression didn't change. But something shifted behind his eyes. A flicker, there and gone, like a fish moving beneath dark water. People act all kinds of ways, he said evenly. Most of it has nothing to do with the person they're acting around. It was a deflection. A masterful one. Smooth, unhurried, designed to redirect without drawing attention to itself. Sharon recognized it because she had spent years watching men deflect. Daniel had been an expert. I'm fine. It's nothing. Don't worry about it. Words that sounded like answers but were really just doors closing. She decided to push. You haven't told me anything real about yourself, she said. Not one thing. You sat down at my table, ordered my dinner, and you're sitting here like you have all the time in the world, but I don't know a single thing about who you actually are. Anthony looked at her then. Fully. And for a moment, just a moment, the mask slipped. Not dramatically. Not with any grand gesture. It was something in the way his jaw softened. The way his shoulders, which had been perfectly still all evening, dropped by half an inch. As if the weight of her directness had landed somewhere he wasn't expecting. Tonight isn't about me, Sharon, he said quietly. Tonight is about you not being alone. The word settled over her like something warm and uncomfortable at the same time. Warm because no one had said anything like that to her in a very long time. Uncomfortable because she wasn't sure she deserved it. Not from a stranger. Not from anyone. She was about to respond when one of the men in the suit, the taller one, broad-shouldered, with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite, appeared at Anthony's side. He didn't sit. He didn't speak loudly. He simply leaned down, close to Anthony's ear, and murmured something. 3 sentences. Maybe 4. His expression was tight. Controlled. Urgent. Anthony listened without moving. His eyes stayed on Sharon, steady, unblinking, but something changed in them. A door closing somewhere deep inside. His right hand, resting casually on the white linen, curled. Not into a fist. But the fingers tightened. Just enough that the tendons along the back of his hand rose slightly beneath his skin. Sharon saw it. The man straightened, stepped back, and melted into the background of the restaurant like smoke dissolving into air. Sharon's gaze moved from the spot where the man had stood back to Anthony's hand. Then up to his face. "Is someone in trouble?" she asked. Anthony blinked. It was subtle, barely perceptible, but it was there. A crack in the composure. Because the question had surprised him. "Not are you in trouble?" Not what was that about. She had asked about someone else. Someone other than herself, other than him, other than the situation unfolding right in front of her. In his world, the world of boardrooms and backrooms, of men who measured every word for leverage, no one asked about someone else. Not first. Not instinctively. Not with genuine concern woven into the fabric of the question. "Nothing I can't handle," he said. His voice was the same. Calm. Measured. But his hand, Sharon noticed, didn't unclench for another 30 seconds. The silence that followed was different from the ones before. Heavier. Charged with something unspoken. The weight of a world Sharon couldn't see pressing against the edges of this quiet, golden table. It was Sharon who broke it. And when she did, her voice had changed. The sharpness was gone. The questions, the probing, the careful analysis. All of it fell away. What remained was something raw. Something she hadn't meant to say out loud. Not tonight. Not to this man. Not to anyone. "My boyfriend left me here tonight," she said. Her voice was steady, but only barely. The steadiness of someone holding something together with both hands. "He said." She paused. Swallowed. The pearl necklace at her throat caught the light as she breathed. "He said I wanted too much from life. That I was exhausting." A pause that lasted longer than it should have. Maybe he was right. The words hung in the air between them. Fragile, exposed, like something that had been kept in a dark drawer for a very long time and had finally been pulled into the light. Anthony said nothing. He didn't rush to fill the silence with reassurance. He didn't offer empty comfort or hollow contradiction. He simply sat, perfectly still, perfectly present, and let her words exist in the space between them without flinching away from them. But his jaw tightened. Sharon saw it. A muscle moving just beneath the skin, slow and deliberate, like something being held in place by force. His eyes, which had been calm all evening, hardened. Not at her. Not even at Daniel, whose name he didn't know yet. At the idea itself. At the cruelty of it. Quiet, surgical, the kind of damage that left no visible wound but hollowed a person out from the inside. Anthony looked at Sharon, really looked at her, past the burgundy dress and the careful makeup and the composure she was fighting to maintain, and saw something he recognized. Something he had carried inside his own chest for longer than he cared to remember. He opened his mouth, closed it, and chose, instead, to simply stay. Sometimes that was enough. Dinner ended the way it had begun. Quietly. Not with grand gestures or dramatic conclusions, but with a slow, natural exhale. The plates were cleared. The wine glass, Sharon's, still mostly untouched, was taken away without comment. The piano player shifted into something softer, something that sounded like an ending disguised as a lullaby. Sharon set her napkin on the table and looked at Anthony across the white linen. The evening had done something to her. Not healed her, not yet, but loosened something. Like a knot she had been carrying in her chest for years, had been given just enough slack to breathe. "Thank you," she said. The words came out smaller than she intended. Quieter. As if gratitude itself embarrassed her, as if she wasn't sure she was allowed to feel it. Not tonight, not after everything. Anthony nodded. Once. The way he did everything. Unhurried. Deliberate. as if each gesture had been considered and chosen before it was made. "You didn't have to do any of this," Sharon added. She folded her hands in her lap. A habit, something to do when the silence pressed too close. "Sit here. Stay. Any of it." Anthony held her gaze for a moment. Something moved behind his eyes. Not quite a smile, not quite sadness. Something in between. Something that had no clean name. "No," he said simply. "I didn't." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. The fact that he had chosen to, that was the sentence. Sharon stood first. She smoothed her dress with both hands, a nervous gesture she wasn't aware she made, and gathered her clutch from beside the chair. The evening was over. The borrowed table, the borrowed time, the borrowed warmth of a stranger's presence. It was time to go back to her own life. Back to her apartment. Back to the silence that waited for her there like an old, unwelcome roommate. Anthony rose with her. They walked together toward the front of the restaurant. Not side by side, exactly, but close. Close enough that Sharon could feel the quiet authority that surrounded him like heat radiating from something burning underneath. They reached the entrance. And stopped. The rain had come. Not a drizzle. Not a gentle mist. It was the kind of rain that falls like the sky has cracked open. Heavy, relentless, hammering the pavement outside in sheets so thick that the street lights had become nothing but blurred gold smudges against the dark. Water streamed down the glass doors in rivers. The sound of it filled the lobby. Loud, almost violent, a stark contrast to the hushed intimacy of the restaurant behind them. Sharon stared at it. Her shoulders dropped, just slightly. One more thing. One more obstacle on a night that had already taken everything from her. She didn't have an umbrella. She didn't have a car. Daniel had taken the cab they arrived in. Of course he had. Of course. She reached for the door handle anyway. Rain or not, she wasn't going to stand here. She wasn't going to ask for help. She had spent enough of tonight feeling like someone who needed rescuing. Anthony's hand closed gently around her wrist. Not gripping. Not pulling. Just stopping. The way you stop someone from stepping off a curb without looking. Sharon turned. Looked at him. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were firm. Decided. "Don't," he said quietly. He didn't say let me help you. He didn't say I have a car. He simply said don't, and then he guided her gently with one hand at the small of her back, toward a side corridor she hadn't noticed before. A private exit. A door that opened onto a covered walkway where a black car sat idling, its engine a low, patient hum, rain cascading off the canopy above it in a curtain of silver water. Sharon stopped at the edge of the walkway. Turned to him. "I don't get into cars with strangers," she said. This time, Anthony did smile. A real one. Small, crooked, almost boyish. It lasted only a second, but it cracked something open in his face that made him look younger. Softer. Like a version of himself that existed before the world taught him to be something harder. "Smart," he said. "But it's also pouring. And you'll get sick. And I'll feel guilty for the rest of the night." Sharon looked at the rain. Then at the car. Then back at Anthony. At the smile that had already faded, replaced by that quiet, watchful stillness she was beginning to recognize. She got in. The interior of the car was warm. Dark leather. The faint scent of cedar. The same clean, sharp smell she had caught at the restaurant. A partition separated them from the driver. The rain filled the silence outside, but inside, the world had shrunk to the size of this back seat. Two people, a dim golden light, and the hush of something neither of them was ready to name. Sharon gave the driver her address. Not Anthony's. Her own. A small, deliberate act of independence. A quiet refusal to surrender any more of herself tonight than she already had. They drove in silence for a while. The city moved past the windows in streaks of light and shadow, buildings and street lamps bleeding together through the rain like a painting left out in the storm. It was Anthony who spoke first. "Do you actually believe that?" he asked. His voice was low, barely above the sound of the rain. "That you're too much? Or did you just believe him?" The question landed in the space between them like a stone dropped into still water. Sharon felt the ripples move through her, quiet, slow, spreading outward in every direction. She didn't answer right away. The rain hammered the windows. The car moved through the dark city. Somewhere, a traffic light changed from red to green, and the world kept turning, indifferent and unhurried. "I don't know any more," she finally said. Her voice was barely a whisper. Anthony nodded. He didn't push. He didn't offer reassurance or easy comfort. He simply accepted the answer, the honesty of it, the weight of it, and let it exist between them without trying to fix it. Then, after another silence, longer this time, heavier, full of something building, he spoke again. And his voice was different now. Quieter. Stripped of the calm authority that had carried him through the entire evening. What remained was something rawer. Something that sounded almost like conviction. "For what it's worth," he said, "the men who can't handle extraordinary women aren't strong." A pause. The rain. The dark. "They're just small." Sharon turned her head and looked at him. Really looked at him. Past the suit, past the quiet command, past the mystery that clung to him like smoke. She looked at the lines around his eyes. The way his jaw held something taut and unresolved. The way his hands rested in his lap. Still, but not relaxed. Hands that carried weight she couldn't see. And in his eyes, in the dim golden light of the back seat, with rain falling all around them like the world was trying to wash itself clean, she saw something she couldn't name. Something that looked like it hurt. Something that looked, for just a moment, exactly like her own. The car slowed. Her building appeared through the rain. Modest, familiar, ordinary. The life she was returning to. Sharon gathered her clutch. Opened the door. The rain touched her face. Cold, sharp, real. She stepped out. Then turned back, one hand still on the door, the rain catching in her hair and running down her cheeks like tears she hadn't given herself permission to shed. "I still don't know your name," she said. Anthony looked at her through the open door, through the rain, through the dark, through everything that stood between who he was and who she was beginning to see. "Anthony," he said. A pause. The rain filled it. "And Sharon." His eyes held hers. Steady. Certain. "You were never too much." He was just too little. She stood there for a long moment after the car pulled away. The rain soaked through her dress, plastered her hair to her face, ran in cold rivers down her skin. But she didn't move. Didn't rush inside. Didn't feel the cold the way she should have. She stood in the rain, and for the first time all night, she didn't feel empty. She felt something new. Something small and unnamed and impossibly fragile. Something that, if she held it carefully enough, might survive until morning. Anthony Cameron's study was a room built for silence. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls, not for decoration, but for weight. The kind of books no one read twice but everyone kept, because their presence said something about the man who owned them. Dark leather spines. Gold-lettered titles. A room that smelled of aged wood and something faintly like smoke, though no one had lit a cigarette in this house for years. The 4th wall was glass. A single enormous window that looked out over the city. At night, it turned the room into a mirror. During the day, it let the gray morning light in like an uninvited guest. Cold, honest, unforgiving. It was morning now. Anthony sat behind his desk, a broad slab of black walnut, polished to a shine so deep it looked like water, and stared at a manila folder that had been placed there 40 minutes ago by Raphael, his right-hand man. Raphael, who never spoke more than necessary, who had slid the folder across the desk with 2 fingers, said, "Sharon Elliott," and left without another word. Standard protocol. Anthony ran checks on everyone. Every person who crossed his path, every face that entered his orbit, every name that mattered, even slightly. It was survival. It was control. It was the one thing he had built his entire life around. Knowing everything before anyone else did. He opened the folder. The first page was clinical. Sharon Elliott. Age 32. Illustrator. Freelance work, mostly children's books. Small publishers. Independent presses. A modest apartment on the east side of the city. No criminal record. No debts. No affiliations. A life that was quiet and careful and entirely, painfully ordinary. Anthony read it without expression. His eyes moved down the page. Steady, practiced, the way a man reads a map he has already memorized. Then he turned to the second page. And stopped. The second page was older. Background. Early life. The kind of information that lived in school records and social services files and the quiet, devastating gaps between official documents. Father. Absent. Mother. Catherine Elliott. Left the family home when Sharon was 7 years old. No forwarding address. No custody arrangement. No goodbye. Anthony read the sentence twice. Then a third time. Not because he didn't understand it. Because his body understood it before his mind was willing to. Something cold moved through his chest. Slow, deep, the way ice forms over water. Not sudden. Not dramatic. Just a quiet, creeping recognition that settled into his bones and stayed there. He set the folder down. Carefully. The way you set down something fragile. Something that, if you grip too tightly, will shatter. His hand was shaking. It was barely visible. A tremor in the fingers of his right hand, the one that had rested so calmly on the table at Lumiere just hours before. The hand that had curled when Raphael brought him urgent news. The hand that had guided Sharon toward the car with a gentleness that surprised even him. That hand was trembling now. Because Sharon Elliott's story, the quiet, brutal architecture of it, was not a stranger's story. It was his. The memory came not as a scene but as a sensation. The way memories do when they have been locked away long enough. They don't replay. They hit. Like walking into a wall you forgot was there. A woman's voice. Warm once. Then distant. Then gone. You'll never choose me, Anthony. So I'm choosing myself. He had been 26. Not yet powerful. Not yet feared. Just a man with too much ambition and not enough sense. A man who loved someone deeply, quietly, with the kind of devotion that asks nothing and gives everything. Her name was Claire. She had dark hair and a laugh that made rooms feel smaller. In the good way. The intimate way. She left on a Tuesday. No drama. No tears. She packed while he was at work and left a note on the kitchen table. 3 lines, written in her careful handwriting, like she had practiced them beforehand. You work too hard. You love too quietly. And I am tired of being the thing you come back to instead of the thing you choose. Anthony had read that note standing in his kitchen, in the gray morning light, and something inside him had gone very, very still. He did not cry. He did not call her. He did not chase. He closed the door. Locked it. And spent the next 5 years building an empire so vast, so airtight, so impenetrable that no one, not a single person on this earth, would ever have the power to leave him feeling like that again. He succeeded. Spectacularly. But the cost was everything soft inside him. Everything open. Everything that had once been capable of looking at a woman across a table and feeling something other than strategy. Until last night. Anthony picked up the folder again. Turned back to Sharon's page. Read the line one more time. Mother left the family home when Sharon was 7 years old. No forwarding address. No custody arrangement. No goodbye. 2 children. 2 different cities. 2 different decades. But the same wound, the same invisible shapeless damage that comes when someone you love decides you are not enough reason to stay. Sharon had responded to it by loving harder. Hoping more. Keeping her heart open, wide open, recklessly open, as if she could love her way into being chosen. As if she just gave enough, someone would finally look at her and say yes. You. Stay. Anthony had responded to it by closing everything. Sealing every door. Building walls so high and so thick that nothing could reach him. Not pain, not joy, not the quiet, dangerous warmth of another person's presence. 2 halves of the same broken thing. He closed the folder. Set it on the desk. And looked out the window, at the city below, gray and wet and indifferent, still damp from last night's rain. Somewhere out there, Sharon Elliott was waking up in her small apartment. Perhaps still in the burgundy dress. Perhaps staring at the ceiling, wondering if last night had been real. Anthony stared at the city for a long time. Then he reached for his phone. He called her on Wednesday. Sharon almost didn't answer. The number was unknown, no name, no context, just 10 digits on a screen. But something made her pick up. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the quiet, stubborn part of her that refused to let the world shrink any further than it already had. Sharon. His voice. Come. Unhurried. The same voice that had asked her to stay. Anthony. A pause. How did you get this number? The restaurant, he said. Smoothly. Easily. A small lie. Careful, deliberate. Designed to keep his world invisible to hers. They had it on file from the reservation. Sharon didn't believe him entirely. But she didn't push. Not yet. He invited her to dinner. Not Lumiere. Somewhere quieter. A private dining room above a bookshop on the west side of the city. No waiters hovering. No piano. Just 2 place settings, a single candle, and the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. Sharon agreed. But not without conditions. If this is some kind of power move, she said, her voice steady, I'm leaving. Anthony almost smiled. She could hear it, the ghost of it, in the half-second pause before he spoke. It's not, he said. And hung up. The second dinner was a different creature entirely. The first had been survival. 2 strangers navigating wreckage, speaking around wounds rather than into them. This was something else. This was 2 people choosing, consciously, to sit across from each other again. To try. Sharon arrived first. She wore something simple. A soft gray dress, her hair down, no pearls. She had stopped dressing for other people. Tonight, she dressed for herself. It felt strange. It felt slowly like something close to right. Anthony arrived 7 minutes later. Same charcoal suit. Different cut. Same perfect fit. He sat across from her without ceremony, without the dramatic weight his presence had carried at Lumiere. Here, in this small, quiet room above a bookshop, he was just a man. Sitting down. Trying. The conversation flowed differently this time, not in careful, guarded exchanges, but in long, wandering threads that moved from one thought to the next like water finding its own path. Sharon talked about her work. About the children's books she illustrated. Small worlds she built with ink and color. Worlds where lost girls found magic and lonely boys discovered they were braver than they thought. Anthony listened. Not the way powerful men usually listened. Scanning for leverage, waiting for their turn to speak. He listened the way someone listens when they are hearing something they have needed to hear for a very long time. You build worlds for other people to believe in, he said quietly, after she had finished describing a book about a girl who discovers a door in her bedroom wall that leads somewhere only she can go. Sharon looked at him. Someone has to. But what about your world? He asked. What do you believe in? The question hung between them. Simple on the surface, devastating underneath. Sharon opened her mouth, closed it, looked down at her hands, resting on the table, relaxed for the first time in longer than she could remember. I'm still figuring that out, she admitted. Anthony nodded. And then Sharon, feeling the strange, unfamiliar safety of this moment, this quiet room, this man who kept showing up without being asked to, turned the question around. What about you? She said. What do you actually want, Anthony? The question landed differently than any other she had asked him. It wasn't probing. It wasn't suspicious. It was genuine, the kind of question you only ask someone when you have begun, without meaning to care about the answer. Anthony was quiet for a long time. The candle flickered. Somewhere below them, the bookshop hummed with the quiet presence of old pages. The city moved outside, indifferent and alive. I want to stop being afraid, he said. The words came out low, stripped bare. No armor, no deflection. Just the truth, raw and unpolished and terrifyingly honest, falling from his lips like something he had been holding inside for years and had only just now found the courage to release. Sharon looked at him across the table. And she saw it, the crack she had glimpsed in the car, in the rain, in the way his hand had trembled when he thought no one was watching. The real man. Not the one the world built. The one underneath. She reached across the table. Slowly, carefully, and placed her hand over his. Just that. Just a touch. Warm, brief, quiet. A hand covering a hand. Nothing more. Anthony didn't pull away. He didn't move at all, in fact. He simply sat, perfectly still, perfectly present, and let the warmth of her touch move through him like light entering a room that had been dark for a very long time. I need to pause here and ask you something. Have you ever met someone, completely by accident, in the middle of your worst moment, who made you feel seen in a way no one else ever had? Someone who didn't try to fix you, but simply stayed? Drop a comment and tell me, because what's about to happen next will change everything for both of them. 3 days later, Sharon found out who Anthony Cameron was. Not from him. Not from a conversation or a confession or a carefully chosen moment of truth. From a headline. Small black text on a news app she checked every morning while her coffee cooled. A habit so ordinary it made the discovery feel like the ground had opened up beneath her feet. Anthony Cameron. The man behind the city's shadow empire. Beneath the headline, a photograph. His face. Sharp jaw. Dark eyes. The same calm, unreadable expression she had seen across 2 dinner tables, in the back of a rain-soaked car, in the quiet light of a bookshop above the city. Her Valentine. Sharon read the article once. Then again. Then closed the app and sat very still. The way she had sat at Lumiere when Daniel left. The same stillness. The same dangerous hollow quiet that comes when something you trusted turns out to be something you didn't understand at all. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She got dressed, put on shoes, and drove to his estate. The confrontation happened in his study, the same room where Anthony had read her file, where the glass wall looked out over the city, where the morning light came in cold and honest and unforgiving. Sharon stood in the middle of it. Her phone in her hand, the article still glowing on the screen. Her voice was steady, but only because she was holding it there by force, the way you hold a door shut against a storm. You knew, she said. You knew exactly who you were when you sat down at that table. You knew what I was going through. And you used it. Anthony stood by the window. He didn't move toward her. He didn't reach for her. He simply stood, hands at his sides, shoulders straight, and let the accusation land. I sat down, he said, because I saw someone in pain. And then, I stayed because I saw someone extraordinary. Sharon shook her head. The phone trembled in her grip, the only crack in her composure. And what about my safety, Anthony? What about my life? Do you think I can just ignore what you are? What your world is? The question filled the room. It filled the silence. It filled every space between them that had, over the past few days, begun to close. Anthony looked at her. And for the first time, the first real time, he had no answer. No deflection. No carefully constructed line designed to redirect without revealing. Because she was right. He couldn't promise her safety. He couldn't promise her a normal life. He couldn't promise that loving him would cost her nothing. The truth was, it would cost her everything. And he knew it. And she deserved to know it too. So he said nothing. Sharon waited. The silence stretched, long, agonizing, full of everything neither of them could say. Then she turned, walked to the door, stopped with her hand on the handle. She didn't look back. Don't contact me, she said, quietly. Finally, the door closed. Anthony stood alone in his study, in the cold morning light, surrounded by the weight of everything he had built, and felt, for the first time in years, the full, devastating cost of what it meant to be Anthony Cameron. The empire didn't matter. The power didn't matter. The control he had spent a decade constructing, brick by careful brick, none of it mattered. Because the one thing he wanted, he had just watched walk out the door. 2 days of silence. Sharon didn't answer her phone. Didn't draw. Didn't leave her apartment except once, to buy groceries, moving through the store like a ghost, filling her cart with things she wouldn't taste. She sat on her couch in the evenings and stared at the bookshelves along her wall. The children's books she had illustrated herself, small colorful spines full of stories about courage and second chances and the quiet magic of believing in something you couldn't yet see. She wondered, in the gray hours before sleep, if she was a hypocrite. On the second night, a knock came. Not loud. Not urgent. Just a single quiet rap against her door, the kind that almost didn't happen, as if the person on the other side had hesitated 3 times before finally committing to it. Sharon opened the door. No one was there. But on the floor, resting against the threshold like it had been placed there with care, was an envelope. Plain white. No seal. No letterhead. Just her name, written on the front in handwriting she didn't recognize. Careful, deliberate, each letter formed with a kind of attention that suggested the words inside had cost something to write. She picked it up, went back inside, sat down on the couch, under the warm light of the lamp beside her, and opened it. 1 page. Folded once. Anthony's confession. Not an apology, not an excuse, but a truth, laid bare on paper the way it had never been laid bare in speech. He wrote about the night he saw her crying at Lumiere. About how she had reminded him of someone. Not a stranger, but himself. The boy he had been before the empire. Before the armor. Before he decided that being untouchable was the only way to survive being left. He wrote about Claire. About the note on the kitchen table. About the 5 years he spent building walls so high that no one could reach him. And how, for the first time in all those years, Sharon had made him want to tear them down. The letter ended simply. No grand gesture. No dramatic declaration. Just a truth and an invitation. 2 sentences that Sharon read 3 times before the words fully landed. If you come, I'll be there. If you don't, I'll understand. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to deserve the version of myself you saw that night. Sharon set the letter down on the coffee table. Picked it up again. Set it down again. Then she looked at her desk, at the illustration she had been working on before everything shattered. A drawing she had started the night after their second dinner, lost in the quiet flow of charcoal and instinct, not fully aware of what she was creating until it was already on the page. A man and a woman, standing in the rain, not touching, not speaking, just standing, close enough to feel each other's warmth, far enough apart to still make a choice. Sharon stared at the drawing for a long time. Then she looked back at the letter, at the address written at the bottom, not as a demand, as a door, left open. The choice was hers. 1 year. Lumiere looked exactly the same. The gold light, the white linen, the piano player in the corner playing something slow and aching. The same candles. The same quiet hum of a room full of people performing love for an evening. The same corner table. Intimate, tucked away, draped in warmth. Sharon sat there. Early. Come. Alone. But not the way she had been alone the first time. Not hollow. Not waiting for someone to prove she mattered. She was simply there. Present. Whole. Dressed in something that made her feel like herself. Not for him, not for anyone. Because she had spent the past year learning, slowly and painfully, that being enough had never been the question. It had always been who was asking. She had gone to him. That night, after reading the letter, after staring at the drawing until the rain outside her window matched the one on the page, she had driven to his estate. It had not been easy. Nothing that followed had been easy. Learning who Anthony Cameron truly was, all of it, not just the headline, had required a kind of courage Sharon didn't know she possessed. But she had done it. Day by day. Truth by truth. Not because he was perfect. Because he was trying. And because, for the first time in her life, someone was trying not to impress her, but to be worthy of her. The door opened. The room shifted, the same subtle, unmistakable change in pressure that Sharon remembered from the very first night. Waiters straightened. The piano player's eyes flickered upward. The air itself seemed to rearrange. Anthony walked in. Same charcoal suit. Same calm, unhurried stride. The same quiet authority that filled every room he entered. But something was different now. Something Sharon could see that no one else in the restaurant could. A softness around his eyes. A looseness in his shoulders. The look of a man who had spent a year dismantling the armor he had spent a decade building. Not all at once, but piece by piece, in the quiet moments between two people who had chosen, against every odd, to stay. He saw her. Stopped. And for just a moment, that same flicker Sharon had caught on the very first night. Something moved across his face. Not surprise. Not calculation. Relief. He walked to the table. Sat down across from her. The same chair. The same table. The same soft gold light falling across white linen like a blessing neither of them had earned but both of them had finally stopped running from. The piano played. The rain, because of course it was raining, because the universe, it turned out, had a sense of poetry, tapped against the windows in a rhythm that sounded like something beginning rather than something ending. Anthony looked at Sharon. She looked at him. And he said it. The same words. The same calm, quiet tone. But this time they carried everything. A year of truth. A year of choosing. A year of two broken people learning slowly that the cracks in them were not flaws to be fixed but doors that had been waiting, all along, to let someone in. Can I be your Valentine tonight? Sharon smiled. Not the fragile, uncertain expression of a woman who had just been abandoned. Not the guarded, suspicious look of someone bracing for disappointment. A real smile, warm, open, full of the quiet, unshakable knowledge that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. You already are, she said. The rain continued. The candles flickered. The city moved on outside, indifferent and alive, unaware that at a corner table in a golden room, two people who had once been shaped entirely by loss had finally, quietly, found each other. And the story closed the way it had opened. Not with a grand declaration, but with a simple, devastating truth, spoken softly in the space between two people who had learned the hardest lesson of all. Rejection had not been the end of Sharon Elliott's story. It had been the beginning of the one she was always meant to live. And so I'll leave you with this final question. Looking back on your own life, can you think of a moment when something painful, something that felt like the worst thing that could ever happen to you, actually turned out to be the door that led you exactly where you needed to be? Leave a comment below and share your story. Because if Sharon and Anthony taught us anything tonight, it's this. Sometimes, the universe doesn't break us. It redirects us. And the best love stories don't begin with perfection. They begin with someone brave enough to stay.